Could swear I've done this to so many times already and I still just can't get it right. But it's okay. Let's go with this one. Hello everyone, welcome to my channel, the Paul Delos Santos Writer channel. For those who don't know, I am Paul. I am the author and host of the podcast, The Delos Diaries, where I talk to authors about their writing process and what got them into writing. I think that is the most important thing, is learning from other people's stories, and I want to help them tell their stories and how they became a writer in this crazy world that we live in. So today I am doing the AuthorTube Newbie Tag challenge. I think that's one of those things where, a lot of AuthorTubers will jump into space and do it, but I'm redoing it from my perspective because A, it's a new channel. I need a channel trailer. It's gonna go up there. The second thing is that it's a fun way to introduce myself in the channel if you don't know who I am. So for those who don't know, the AuthorTube challenge, the AuthorTube Newbie Tag is made by Jenna Staley, who's descriptions in the podcast, in the description below, and she created this tag for AuthorTube newbies to kind of connect themselves with other people. And I think it's one of those networking things, but also just to see other people who are going through the same struggles you are. Before I get into answering the questions, I would like to remind everyone to please subscribe to this channel and also Delos Diaries channel by clicking the subscribe button on both videos and clicking the notification bell to get the latest up-to-date information. So question 1, what's your book's pitch? Well, I have multiple works that I'm working on. I think the most important thing is to also have projects that you can kind of deviate to from time to time. I know some people will disagree with the idea that you're going to have, you should really focus on one, but I'm one of those people who could work on multiple projects, just the way I am. And I think the biggest thing with my favorite one that I'm currently working on, which is my cyberpunk samurai story, is the fact that I'm also working on it cohesive with a comic book of the same story, basically just taking a novel version and just turning it into a comic book series. I think that's what is really happening with that book, and it's really an interesting concept. I really said I was gonna do something with a Ronin and put him in a cyberpunk world, not really like some isekai portal stuff, but rather just the modern day cyber samurai. I think that's what we're looking at with the story, and I think the ability to kind of create this world was fun. I think cyberpunk really offers a lot of good world building opportunities, and I think putting a samurai with the traits that he has in terms of changing the shifting of the loyalty from the shogun to the corporate world, I think those are some areas we can explore, and I think we can explore the same themes that many older samurai films and put it into a very futuristic society. I think one of those things was, it really feels like you can do these types of things when you have samurai stories, and you can just take the same similar stories and put them in a different setting, because for example Western's a big one, and kind of just create something that's unique and fun. And I think that's the big thing. And I think for me, just when I pitched this book, it's like cyberpunk's a really big thing, because with the growth of AI and all these other cybernetics and all these other cool stuff that's approaching our future, it really feels like cyberpunk's becoming more, not really a futuristic thing, but rather a common world thing. So it's just one of those, I really feel like I should be writing about it, just because I could do some analysis of the concept of humanity. I think as we move toward AI and bio implants and everything like that, it feels like we're slowly losing that humanity. So I'll be able to explore the cores of cyberpunk theory, which is basically a lot of it has to do with the humanity versus technology, the fusion of the two, and add the samurai element is also very fun. So overall, that's my book's pitch. It's called Project Blade. You'll learn about it later on the channel, but overall, it's it's coming along really well. Question 2, if you're a book, how would you pitch yourself? Well, it's funny because if I was to pitch myself as a book, it'd be like a contemporary piece where you look at the struggles of man. I think the whole concept of literary fiction has always been just the concepts and struggles of what it is in daily life, the concepts of how do we approach relationships and all that fun stuff. I mean, it's devoid of romance, devoid of magic, devoid of fantasy, devoid of science. It's very much day-to-day life, and I think that's where we can really get a slice of human life. And I really like, it's funny because slice of mango to me is one of my motivations, and slice of life is really big in terms of just giving a relaxing kind of vibe. And I think overall, just a really relaxed, pick up a coffee book, a cozy contemporary literary fiction book, is what I would view my life as, because it's really just there's lessons to be learned from the various adventures, but it's not really this whole big adventure story, and there's a clear-cut villain and clear-cut thing. So it's really just a matter of just focusing on the human emotion, the human condition. And I think that's the best way to pitch my book, is that you look at my life and it's been like a lot of things have been up and down. I think that's the biggest thing. So overall, if you ask me to pitch myself as a book, it'd be like literary fiction meets slice of life. I think that's the best way to put it. Question 3, what do you usually write? Well, this is a loaded question, mostly because I write, I'm interested in a lot of things. I think, for me as a writer, it's always been this concept of never say no to things. And I think we'll get to the next question, but I primarily write like a lot of nonfiction, a lot of analysis of art of pro wrestling, particularly if you go, visit one of my newsletters I think I basically have a newsletter that looks at pro wrestling from a literary standpoint. I do also do nonfiction sports, as I work for NHL.com as an independent contributor, and also a couple of the sports sites around Las Vegas. So that's the primary thing I write. Now, as for a fiction sense, right now we're focusing on cyberpunk. I also write urban fiction. I also write traditional sci-fi. And literary fiction is really a big part of mine. Is like I really like the reading about the human condition, as well as I mentioned in the previous question. So it's a lot of like various elements. When you meld them together, that's what you get when I'm writing. Is like you get like the speculative fiction side of like this big worlds and magic and science and all this fun stuff, but also melded together with the concept of literary fiction, which is very much a human condition thing. I think that's a big part of what I write. And I would say the big 3 genres of fiction I work in is science fiction, fantasy, and literary and contemporary. So those are the best way to put it. Next question. What's something you'll never write? Well, this is another question that I feel is very difficult to answer, just because I feel that I wouldn't be doing myself justice if I said never say never. I think the things I don't write right now, I think it's easier for me to say what I'm not writing right now is a lot of like romance and horror and thriller and mystery. But there are elements that I can easily glean from all these things. And I think that's the big thing, is that there's nothing off limits for me to write about. I mean, I'm willing to write about anything, but the thing is that it's more of a interest now when you have so many interests that it becomes, but the default thing is that you don't write about. Well, I say never say never. I think that's one of the things I've learned in life, is that you never really know what can happen. So for me to really like say I'll never write something in this genre, that's kind of foolish, and I feel short-sighted, because you never know. Maybe I'll get inspired to write a romance story. Who knows? Maybe I'll do a mystery. Maybe I'll do a thriller. And those are the types of things that I feel are overall lacking from a lot of writers, that they say never. They really close themselves off to books that they'll never read and write. And I feel that's stunting growth. And I really would like to change the approach of a lot of writers and say, just write and learn from other genres. Question 5, what's your goal for starting an AuthorTube channel? Well, this is like attempt 1.5 for an AuthorTube channel, because the first channel I have is very much a channel focused on the podcast, the Delos Diaries, and you can check out top right here. You can check out the Delos Diaries right there, because it's really just something I really like, and I'll also link in the description below. And I think the Delos Diaries to me allows me to interview a lot of authors and get to know, learn through interviewing, and learn from the osmosis, so to speak, because I think it's writing. So back to the original question though, why I started the AuthorTube channel for this specific channel. Well, I thought about it for a long time, and it was like, should I go and put them all on one channel? Should I split it? And I think I came to the decision to split the channels, where the podcast is strictly the podcast, and the AuthorTube channel is strictly the AuthorTube channel. They kind of go over the same topics, and there's a lot of crossover between the 2 channels. But I feel that, if I just kind of keep the algorithm like clean in terms of like, this is a podcast channel, so just focusing on the writing podcast and send it to Writer Podcast, and this is AuthorTube, and this is the videos about vlogging and ideas and experiments and writing sessions. This is what it does. So I think it kind of like leaves the algorithm and holds its hand a little bit. I think that's my focus. And I think the second thing is that I want to kind of like develop the process and kind of show everyone what the behind the scenes look of like how I'm applying all the writing tips I'm getting from the podcast, and how that podcast, if you listen to it, you can get some information and learn some tips and tricks, because we will be doing these things called, just going to be a question later, but there'll be a lot of information that comes through the podcast that I'll be repurposing and doing things based on that and kind of using it as a teaching tool and kind of just challenges, so to speak. So I think that my goal for us starting at AuthorTube is to really connect with people. I think that's the biggest challenge for a lot of authors, is that they're trying to connect with their audience. And I think I'm trying to find an audience, and I think that's the big thing, is that I'm trying to find the people who will read my book, who will support me in my journey. Because authors, writing is a very lonely thing sometimes, and it's just it's good to have a support system that really can benefit you and others in the long run. And I feel that's something that I am looking for, and that's why I started this channel. Question 6: what made you want to start writing? I will actually. And that's funny because when I did a podcast with another AuthorTuber, Lindy Young, I basically, she told me her story, and it was so connected to mine.
I distinctly remember I was, writing and printing out the chapters as I was going. Each chapter was probably about 1 page, and it was about 2 kids in elementary school age who were time traveling to the era with dinosaurs. I don't even know. They were time traveling and there were dinosaurs involved because I was a huge dino kid. Mm-hmm. So I just kind of was I'll just put in everything I like, which is basically just children who were myself interacting with dinosaurs.
That's so weird because mine is a very similar story as well. I was a time traveling cop.
Not the time travel being a fundamental story element for children for some reason.
Well, I think it's because we want to see eras that we only envision. I think it's one of those, especially, for a lot of kids, it is the dinosaur. I think a lot of kids want to be I want to meet my first dinosaur. And then, it's just for me, it just became a case of I read Gulliver's Travels or I think it's just, the kids' version of these books, of course, but not the not the older version. But I mean, when you read those types of books, you kind of want to know, what does it like to be in that era where there's no planes and no cars and just a lot of trains and steamboats. And so for me, it's I can relate to that story. When you said dinosaurs and time travel, whoa, that's very similar to my story.
But overall, it just feels that's kind of my story. I love telling stories, and it's just it's very strange, in that perspective that, you see this thing that you do as a kid and then you kind of lives with you for the rest of your life. I think the reason why I pursued journalism as a career is just because I love writing. I love writing about sports. And that started at that, and then, life takes its twists and turns and, kind of leads you in directions that you don't anticipate. So next thing you know, I'm writing fiction, and I'm still doing sports, I'm still doing nonfiction, but, I've always had this thing for writing unique stories and writing stories that were very much original from my point of view. So, it's just a lot of growth, and I think a lot of challenges. But overall, what made me start writing was just the love of the art. I think creating things from scratch has always been fun. And and if I could draw, I'd probably be drawing as well. If I can create games, I'd probably create games. I just love the process of creation, and it's always been fun for me. Question 7: what's your publishing path? Well, it's funny because I just recently finished a class at Southern New Hampshire where we kind of went over this, and I was the self-publishing guy, very much the self-publishing guy. But as I went through the class, I'm just I'm not closing the door necessarily on the idea that I can be traditionally published. I think I'm not closing the door on that. It's just as a new writer, you kind of want to maximize things and kind of do things your way, and I think that's important for me. I think I want to control my stories. I want to control it. Now, is there a natural downside to self-publishing? Of course there is. There's a lot of editing, there's a lot of cover design work and line and formatting, and that's stuff that the traditional publisher could take care of it for you. But and at the end of the day, I just, to bluntly answer, I haven't decided. But if you had to say pick one of the traditional paths to publishing, I'd probably choose self-publishing, just because of the amount of control I'd have in terms of how the look and feel and just everything that goes with it. I think that's something important to think about, is when you're pursuing this path of being a fiction writer or just a writer in general with an author focus, you have to identify how you're going to really get this book out to people. And that's something that's you don't really think about right now. And I think where I am currently in my journey, which is I just have to finish the books before I can actually get to the point where I'm querying or developing the stuff for it. And it's just, overall, it just feels like there's a lot of things that have to be done before we can start talking about the publishing path. Question 8: What content do you bring to the AuthorTube table? Well, you know, aside from your standard writing vlogs and challenges, I think the challenges that I'm coming up with are based off the podcast. I think that was something that I really want to do, is I kind of do this cross-pollination thing where, you know, one of the things is what a thing an author does, and I replicate it and I kind of see how it works and feels. There's a couple challenges that I have in mind. I mean, I'm going to do those and they'll be on this channel. Author vlogs are another thing. Project updates, you know, I think, you know, it's one of those things. But I know, and this was a big thing for me. It was like when I was deciding to launch a separate channel, I could easily put this channel on the same channel as the podcast, but I didn't feel that that would be like the most productive way to really do things. I think there'll be a different audience for this than there will be for the podcast. So while they do have intersections, I feel that doing this AuthorTube will see people go through the process. I think the biggest thing for me is I want the space to be authentic and, you know, realistic and fun. I want you to have the confidence by the end of these videos to really see the process that goes into it, and have the confidence that no matter what happens, you'll be able to finish the book that you're aiming to finish and be motivational. And I'm trying to be the best friend to you that gives you the confidence to finish your book. I think that's something that I want to do. And I want you to take you for a journey. I want you to share your journey. I think one of the things I do plan on launching one of these days is an open forum for all of my communities to come together. I think that's something that I want to do. I want to kind of bring everyone together under one Discord server or something else, and we'll figure it out from there. But that's kind of what I want to do. I want to bring a community. I want to create a community, and I just want to help writers get over that hump, so to speak, of not being able to finish. Question 9. What's your biggest writing struggle? Truthfully, I think it's the fact that I write so fast. I think I can write fast. I can crank out words. I can put together a very skeleton story out. But the problem is, my biggest struggle is expanding on the details and, you know, find those points where it can be expanded upon, and, you know, find those little details that make it go a line go from good to great to excellent to great, from excellent to memorable. I think those are the types of things I'm struggling with right now, is how do I process and progress from that starting point of good to memorable. I think that's where we're looking at. That's the biggest struggle for me, because I want to, like, you know, I can tell you the rain fell from the sky. Now, there's a million ways to describe that line. There's a million ways to do that line. And I want to be able to write those lines on first pass, but I know that's not going to be the case all the time. I know that not every day you're going to come up with like some banger line that you're just going to be like, oh my God, that was fantastic. You know, I think that's, you know, a high expectation of yourself to constantly feel like you're going to write the perfect line every time. And I think, you know, it's not a perfection thing, because I can just, I turn my brain off. I don't edit while I'm doing it, but it's the, you know, the revision process that I feel I need to get better at, and finding those spots where in my own personal work and kind of taking my step back, because I'm so close to the work sometimes that I don't see the holes, I don't see the flaws, and it's very difficult for me. I want to be better at the process of taking that step back and seeing where the problems are and doing stuff like that. And I think that's going to come over time. I think that's an experience thing that hopefully I pick up on and grow. Next question. What's your best writing skill? Well, I think I touched on it earlier. It's the ability to get words on pages. I think the ability to write quickly, the ability to write stories and kind of see the A, B, C, D, E plot and go through the lines, and, you know, and then from there layer it all out. I think that, you know, I produce many skeleton stories. Like I've been, you know, doing a November challenge since 2012, and, you know, doing a November challenge since 2012. You know, I have a lot of skeleton style stories. I think they all have places they can improve and be fleshed out and overall grow and change. But the fact that I have all these stories and I have all these skeletons is the biggest writing skill I have. I don't have to worry about getting a first draft done. I never have to worry about that. I will get it done. I just have to put my mind to it and get it done. And my biggest writing skill and my biggest writing trait, the biggest writing strength I have, is the ability to just write. I think that's something that journalism taught me. I think that's something that was taught to me by everyone who wrote. And just generally, it's a good feeling to have. I think one of those things that a lot of people writers struggle with is the fact that they can get caught up on not being able to write. And I think I do a good job at being able to build momentum quickly and running fast. I think I'm a fast starter, and I can maintain that pace for a while. Question 11. if you've been on AuthorTube for a while, what's your biggest tip, AuthorTube tip? Well, like I said before, I'm not new to AuthorTube. I've been around it, for the better part of probably a year now, in terms of me trying out this channel, dead stopping, and then transition the last channel over to podcast and this channel being built. So for me, the best tip I can give AuthorTubers is just do it. I think, a lot of things come down to just doing it. And I think it was one of my guests on the podcast, Rachel Beck, who said, just get addicted to finishing things. I think that's an important trait to have. Is if you get addicted to finishing things, what you're gonna see is you're gonna do things and you're gonna be wanting the feeling of finality. I think that's important, is that you feel that finish and you do the job, but also appreciate the journey and the process. So, it's one of those things where AuthorTube, it's like you look at it from the perspective where you learn a concept, take it in, apply it, learn a concept, and it's just this loop, and you constantly loop through. I think, just being able to do the loop. I think being able to do finish this to lead to this and do that. So I think that's what it is. I think that's what my biggest tip is. Question 12. Are you looking for new channels to follow, betas, CPs, or other types of writing buddies? Yes, quite frankly. I started this channel with the anticipation that I'm gonna start doing writing sprints with some other writers, and I want to kind of schedule them and kind of be a part of that whole writer sprint community and live streaming and being a part of that. I think, it's fun for me to write and sit in silence. Co-working and bodybuilding is such a big thing. And for the ability to kind of just sit down with another writer, focus in for 25 minutes or whatever length you set on a Pomodoro, it's fun. I enjoy it. And it's something that, there's a connection you have with your friends and other people you work with, because the more you do it, the more you're going to feel like, well, I'm accomplishing things. I think, when you have that support system to kind of push you a little bit, kind of help you grow, and overall, I think that's something that's important, because if you don't have that, what's going to end up happening is that you're going to be, there'll be days when you don't want to do it, but it's like that thing you sign up for, you're gonna have to do it eventually. Like if let's say like Cody the writer calls me and he's like, yeah, you want to do a writing channels? I'm like, yeah, let's do a writing stream. You gotta show up. You can't just flake. And I think that's important for me, is that I'm looking for a writing community. I think I want to build this concept where we're able to come together and just write. And I think that's important for me, and I want to build those connections with you. So my first question for you is, what do you like to write? Answer the comments below and we'll talk from there. Last question. What are you most excited for during this new fresh start in AuthorTube? Fresh starts are always good, don't get me wrong, but it's just the feeling that I'm doing something now with the intent of documenting a journey. I think documenting a journey is important. I think at the end of all the projects I'm working on, I want to create a documentary on the creation of it. I want to kind of record every time I have a phone call with Caesar, or share a text message, or finish a section and do that type of stuff. So it's a lot of planning content around it. I think that's what I'm looking forward to, is that I get to experiment. I think, the podcast channel is fine for its podcast. I think it's good for what it does. I just don't think I can experiment on it without screwing up the algorithm. I think that's something that I just don't want to mess with, because the algorithm is going to shift and change and goes up and down and ebbs and flows and all that fun stuff. But you just got to just maintain and feed the beast properly. And I think that's what we're going to do, I think, with these two channels. So, what am I most excited about? Just the fact that I'm able to just kind of break away from just being a podcaster and to display that I am also a writer. And I think that's the most important thing. Well, those were 13 questions I enjoyed answering, again, for a second time, because the last video I did the private on that one on the Delos Diaries channel. But I want to know, for me, what are you looking for from my channel? What do you want to see? Because those are the types of things content I want to create. I want to appeal to you. While there is content that I feel is good for me to make, I think, giving me ideas would be helpful too. So if you have any ideas, leave in the comments below. I respond to every comment. It is just the way I am. I am obsessed with constantly checking the comments and the analytics. And I know I shouldn't run a new channel, but if you do have a comment, leave it below and I'll respond. Also, now would be a good time to subscribe, because like I said, this is a new channel. We're trying to get it to grow as quickly as possible. So it's one of those things where we got to look at it from the perspective that we are in go mode. And I think the same can be said for the Delos Diaries channel, which I will link in the description below. So please follow both channels. I mean, if you want podcast interviews and stuff like that, we'll bring it to you. And then the Delos Diaries, and for writing vlogs and other things, you're gonna be here for everything else. So thanks for watching, guys. In the next video, we're gonna reveal the Project Blade and talk about the details and go from there. So thank you again, and that should be out probably soon. All right, thanks guys, catch you later. Bye.